Hi everyone, this is Catherine Love. This is my lesson plan for Module 6. Once again, I am a special education teacher at Soap Creek Elementary in Cotton County, and I teach in a co-taught class with a general education teacher for 5th graders, and I created a ELA grammar-based 5-day lesson. We focused on the parts of speech at the beginning of this lesson, but we really dug deep into perfect verb tenses and understanding when those inappropriate verb shifts and correlative conjunctions within our writing. This lesson applied to several ISTE standards like the Empowered Learner, Digital Privacy, Knowledge Constructor, Creative Communicator, and Global Collaborator. This lesson started out with a pre-made Canva about the parts of speech. I do not consider it as one of the 3 main digital tools that I use because it was in support of this lesson. But I'll just quickly show you. It was a pre-made through Canva, and it was just supposed to be a quick introductory review. Since we have been learning about parts of speech all year, this was nothing new for students, but it did spark their knowledge, and they understood immediately what we were diving into. So my first digital tool was called Lumio. I highly recommend Lumio if you haven't already used it, but it is kind of like a Nearpod and a PowerPoint, Canva with games all tied to one. And you would just create this on your own and you would share it using the link that projects to your class, kind of like Nearpod and Kahoot do, or they can do it through a QR code. So we went through and looked at these slides. They took active notes in their journals about the perfect and simple progressive verb tenses. And we had our first little game show, which was only for individual students. You can see it's on their devices. And they were just practicing and competing against each other. They would spin and a question regarding a shift in verb tense like this. They would select and they would work for points. And it was just a way to start that individual practice. We moved to the Lumio to consider past, perfect, and future tenses, where they had to then do another individual activity, which was basically a match game, match the sentences to find the right verb tense. And then we had another individual practice before we get to the big game, where it's a speed up. They could race against themselves, and this practice activity was more based on time. Could they read the sentence and immediately know what type of verb it was or where the error was? So it took what they had practiced in the 2 previous activities into one based on a timed activity. And then we moved to that inappropriate shift again to dive deeper, to which we did a team class quiz. These are so much fun. We love to use them. Lumio will generate and split up our class just automatically, and we would play this game 3 or 4 times because they wanted to practice and be the winners, and it was just a great way to get students engaged with the lesson. So then we moved to correlative conjunctions, and students, they first took notes, and we did this on probably Wednesday, but we didn't dive very deep into the correlative just yet because we wanted students on the Thursday to recall that change in verb tense usage. So they rewrote stories on a printable for themselves, and then we moved to our second digital research tool, which was Nearpod, and we did a whole group and then self-paced Nearpod together, diving even deeper with those correlative conjunctions. So what was on the board on my screen, students can see on their screen, but I could open it up so they could practice on their own. I would have students come up to the board and they would use their finger or the pen tool and write in it. And it was just helpful to see how students were gauging. They felt like, okay, now I get it. It's the one that sounds the best or the second best. It's their choice. But it gave them a little more freedom and they could try then on their own, which they really enjoyed. So then after we worked the Nearpod, we went back to the printables and students had a correlative conjunction consumable to do. So then that Friday, it was assessment day. which is very typical in our class. But before we moved on to our assessment, students had another digital tool through Canva, and we took the questions that were on their quiz and modified them or differentiated them to the Canva. And students could practice with the Canva over and over again, identifying parts of speech, and then moving based on those questions, identifying the verb tense, and then moving to decide the correlative conjunction that would apply for each sentence. And they could do it as many times as they needed to really felt comfortable to our last digital tool, which was Microsoft Forms, where they took that quiz. I highly recommend using Microsoft Forms. It is so great. It's to share as a team. They could duplicate it and make their own. I know it's a lot of work to take a printable and then to type it, but you only have to do it once. And we love the graph tools. We could see which questions immediately all students didn't do well on or students did do well on. And it just makes that data collection and analyzing so much easier. And for that reflection of this lesson, I would in the future only focus on verb tenses throughout the week. We know that it got old for students just reading and writing sentences, but we would have liked to just stick to the verb tenses and waited to the next week to do correlative conjunctions because it was a lot of terminology that they were not used to, a lot of critical thinking skills that they were asked of. One thing I did note as a challenge, but it's not that big of a deal because technology is technology, but Lumio does give out sometimes and it kicks kids out. But there's a feature where you can leave on your screen the class code and they can immediately rejoin. But of course, some students were a little upset because then they lost a few seconds in the game, but they understand things happen. And the Nearpod, after a while, the sentences were not challenging, I think, enough for students compared to what was on the quiz. So I'd like to go back and edit that Nearpod for the future. Thanks for listening.